If it's not broke, don't fix it. And it just so happened that, what I do is a little different from what. So, we tried. We did a couple joints here and there. But,
I said, because you were on Truth Hurts.
Yeah, really, it didn't.
It's crazy to know that one of the biggest collaborations hip-hop ever dreamed of, the one fans still whisper about decades later, was destroyed before it even began. No legal scandal, no explosive diss track, just two legends staring at the same canvas and walking away from the painting. At the center of this story is Rakim the God MC signing to Dr. Dre's Aftermath at the height of Dre's creative dominance. Dre promised the culture a seismic album he said would be the biggest hip-hop record ever. And then, silence. No single, no rollout, no album. Just rumors, confusion, and the myth of a project with a title that felt like a prophecy. Oh my God. But here's the twist. This wasn't about money or clout. It was about something deeper. Values, direction, integrity, and the quiet decision Rakim made that shocked the business he walked away. Not to burn a bridge, but to save his voice. And just when you think this story couldn't get any more unbelievable, the truth takes an even sharper turn. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how the God MC utterly despised the direction he was being pushed toward without ever turning it into a public war. In the late 90s, Rakim was a legend among legends, but the market wasn't treating him like one. His comeback album, The 18th Letter, hit big number 4 on the charts. But by 1999, the master peaked at number 72, even with stellar production and a bulldozer single in When I Be on the Mic. The reverence was there. The sales heat wasn't. He didn't suddenly get worse, the industry simply moved on without him. Then a West Coast juggernaut reached out, Dr. Dre. At that moment, Dre was in his imperial era, 2001, ringing through clubs, Eminem bending the mainstream to a Detroit accent, and Aftermath moving like a machine. In October 2000, Dre publicly announced Rakim's signing and dropped a title that sounded like destiny. Oh my God. He didn't whisper it. He said it loud. He said it would be the biggest hip-hop record ever. That's not hype, that's a mission statement. On paper, this pairing looked bulletproof. Dre's surgical sonics, Rakim's elevated lyricism, the man who architected gangster rap's mainstream power teaming with the MC who rewired how verses are written, the culture collectively said, this is the one, and that energy carried forward. Rakim took the stage in 2002 with all the confidence of a man returning to the throne and told fans the album would be in stores by the end of summer. People circled dates. They waited. The idea of a Dre-produced Rakim record didn't just feel possible, it felt overdue. But here's where it gets even more shocking. The train never arrived. Silence, confusion, and a split summer passed. Fall came. No single, no press, no rollout, no oh my God. What made it stranger was the contrast. Just 2 years earlier, in October 2000, Dr. Dre had announced Rakim's Aftermath signing on the set of Eminem's Stand, boldly promising an album that would be the biggest hip-hop record ever, punctuated with a censored "F*** all of y'all." From megaphone to whisper fast. By 2003, the only official word was that Rakim and Aftermath had parted mutually, with creative differences doing the heavy lifting. No finger-pointing, no headlines. In an era where conflict is content, that restraint created a vacuum, and the vacuum turned into a myth. How do you put the God MC and the most powerful producer in the same glass-walled studios and emerge with nothing the world can buy? We did see embers. Rakim's poised appearance on Jay-Z's The Watcher Part 2, a razor-sharp moment on the 8 Mile soundtrack that reminded everyone why this pairing felt inevitable. Around the edges, a stray leak like After You Die, proof that sessions happened, verses were written, ideas sparked. Later on, It's Nothing from the archive, Live Lost and Found, 2007, Rakim would frame the whole arc in one clean couplet. He went to LA to bridge night and day. I guess it wasn't meant to happen. The unanswered question sat there, heavier each year. If the chemistry was real, why no album? The truth is simpler and messier than a headline. When one camp pushes for a harder, confrontational template and the other insists on a clean, universal record your daughter and his grandmother could ride to, even brilliant sessions can stall. And that's not even the most jaw-dropping part. Over time, Rakim began to explain the split in a way that felt exactly like his rhyme style, precise, calm, surgical. In the studio, he said the pattern was consistent. The beat drops and the prompt follows. Talk that shit on this one. Not once, repeatedly. The push wasn't mysterious. It was the proven Aftermath engine aggression, confrontation, high-stakes posture that had already turned street narratives into platinum. Dre is famously exacting, a perfectionist with an unwavering vision once he hears a lane. That machine works when the artist leans into its gravity. Rakim understood all of it and respected it. but he was in a different place. "The artist that I am is the artist I want to remain," he explained, adding that he wouldn't play himself short or exploit the hood or real people for content. He wanted an elevated record that didn't need shock to feel powerful music. Your daughter could listen to, and my grandmother can listen to. That wasn't a new pose. It was his core. From the paid in full era forward, Rakim's standard was clarity, control, and near zero profanity, not because he was timid, but because he believed precision could hit harder than volume. There's a line he shared that captures the pressure of that room perfectly. "Why I gotta beef with everybody?" In one question, he revealed the treadmill so many artists are asked to run: constant targeting, constant escalation, constant proof of dominance. But Rakim had matured out of that orbit. He wanted elevation, not provocation, reflection, not reenactment. In another interview, he framed the clash in one stark contrast. Dre says, "Talk about somebody," and Rakim's instinct answers, "Nah, I want to talk about bringing somebody to life." That isn't disrespect, it's philosophy. Two creators hearing the same drums and pursuing different missions. Creative autonomy sat at the center of it. Rakim contrasted Dre's directive approach with his earlier dynamic with Eric B., who, he said, would hear an idea and simply say, "Go ahead." With Dre, the vision was a fixed arc. With Rakim, the language had to remain his own. When those positions don't find a medium, friction isn't loud, it's immovable. And if you're wondering whether this ever turned personal, the record shows the opposite. Rakim consistently praised Dre's brilliance and never weaponized their differences in public. The conflict wasn't man versus man, it was purpose versus formula. And when those two collide, even sparks can fail to light an album, which makes what he did next even quieter and even more revealing. There was no press conference, no hostile breakup post, no scorched earth diss. Rakim simply decided he was done. He even skipped the flight and took a bus back to New York. After months of anticipation and sessions with a powerhouse producer, he left the bright lights with a notebook and his conscience still intact. The choice wasn't about embarrassing anyone or being unable to rap on Dre's production. The proof that he could is in the fragments. A surgical verse on The Watcher Part 2, a strong moment on the 8 Mile soundtrack, even stray leaks that showed ideas were moving. The issue wasn't capability, it was authorship. By 2003, the official line was mutual separation over creative differences, reiterated by manager Zach Katz. And in later interviews, Rakim clarified what that meant in practice. Repeated prompts to talk that shit, to lean into a confrontational template that Aftermath could rocket into hits, versus his own aim for a clean, universal record your daughter, my grandmother, could ride to. He summed up the entire pressure cooker in a single question. Why I gotta beef with everybody? That's why the bus ride matters. It wasn't a stunt, it was a boundary. He didn't leave a label so much as he left a lane. On It's Nothing, he would reduce the whole chapter to one line. He went to LA 8 to bridge night and day. I guess it wasn't meant to happen. And yet, there were no bridges burnt. Rakim kept crediting Dre's genius and even left the door cracked maybe one day, a joint to visions aligned. In an era that monetizes drama, his quiet, principled exit said something louder. His voice didn't need reinvention. It needed room, and he chose to protect it. Across Rakim's career, one pattern never breaks. He guards authorship. Long before Aftermath, his partnership with Eric B. worked because the creative line was clear. Rakim chose the topics and language, and Eric B. would hear an idea and simply say, "Go ahead." That freedom shaped the God MC's identity. Precise, reflective, resistant to shock. For shock's sake, he's never denied he can go gritty. Some of his hardest records were deliberate choices with a purpose. His example is Juice, a grimy cut made for a film, meant to show where the wrong road leads. The content wasn't branding, it was storytelling. Now place that principle against the Aftermath engine of the 2000s. A pressure cooker that excelled when an artist leaned into confrontation, dominance, intimidation, the template Rakim says he was urged toward. The "talk that shit on this one" prompt he described. Rakim's countervision was the opposite. A clean, universal album you could play for your daughter and my grandmother. A record that elevated rather than escalated. He framed the clash in terms. Dre says, "Talk about taking life." Rakim says, "Talk about giving it." That isn't disrespect. It's worldview. And it explains why compromise tempting in theory felt like defeat in practice. One side heard a lane that sells, the other heard a lane that saves the voice. The choice to step away fit his pattern, not a tantrum. He summarized the chapter later on, It's Nothing, from the archive, Live, Lost, Found. He went to LA to bridge night and day. I guess it wasn't meant to happen. Then he re-emerged. The seventh seal is a conscious purge. The 2017 Eric B. reunion as proof the blueprint still resonates. And from those unreleased sessions, flickers enough to hint at chemistry, never enough to replace autonomy. Even without Oh My God, the culture still caught sparks that proved Dre and Rakim could ignite a room. Listen to the Watcher P2. Rakim sliding onto a Jay-Z release over a Dre framework with that unhurried precision that made him the God MC in the first place. That verse wasn't nostalgia, it was a reassertion. Same with his sturdy turn on the 8 Mile soundtrack during Aftermath's Imperial phase, another signal from the industry's front door that Rakim still belonged at the highest tier of execution. Around the edges, you could hear whispers from the vault, a stray leak like After You Die. Add in the adjacency of a Bhangra-infused radio moment like Truth Hurt's addictive evidence that the creative ecosystem was active, even if the promised album never surfaced. Years later, Rakim would look back on one of those moments and say it lit a fire. He didn't sound wounded, he sounded calibrated, like a craftsman reminded of his range. That's the part we forget. This was never a crisis of talent. It was a question of aim, where to point the pen, how to use the breath control he's honed since the late 80s, what to leave behind when the mic finally goes quiet. Most artists, facing that kind of pressure, cave to a familiar compromise, chase a single, soften the edges, slide into the playlist. Rakim did the opposite. He stayed stubborn in the best way, selective, exact, unwilling to perform a posture he didn't live. The fragments we have are more than trivia, they're affirmations. Gatekeepers kept the door open, the chemistry was real. The myth was born from incompatibility, not incapacity. And here's the quiet twist that completes the circle. He did return on his own terms, proving that what the industry affirmed in pieces, he could deliver in full without surrendering the core. In 2009, after a decade without a solo studio album, Rakim finally returned with The Seventh Seal. It didn't blitz radio or dominate playlists. It debuted at number 61 on the Billboard 200 with about 12,000 first-week sales. On paper, those numbers look modest. They tell a different story. He prioritized conscience over convenience, message over momentum, on his own terms, deliberately, entirely. The album functions like a purge, weighty, deliberate, spiritual, released into an era obsessed with club singles and auto-tune hooks. He said he needed to put certain thoughts into the world to clear the lane so he could have a little fun again. That's not market calculus. That's an artist making the record he must make before he makes the record you expect. The stance syncs with his whole career arc. Rakim never rejected grit. He rejected empty provocation. Where the Aftermath sessions pressed him to talk that shit, The Seventh Seal reasserts authorship. Clean, universal intent, the kind of music you could play for your daughter and his grandmother without diluting the craft. It's the anti-shortcut move. No cosplay, no algorithm chasing, no performance of a posture he doesn't live. And the outcome? Critics who wanted a flashier comeback still acknowledge the coherence of the choice. He preserved the core that made him the God MC: precision, restraint, elevation. The charts didn't define him. The compass did. If you've ever worked through a creative block, you know this logic. Sometimes you exhale the hard truths first so the next breath can flow. The Seventh Seal was that exhale, an intentional reset after silence, and a near-mythic non-album. And just when it felt like the story might end there, the universe handed fans a twist no one saw coming. A full circle return to the stage with Eric B. In 2017, after years of quiet, Eric B. Rakim stepped back on stage not as a retro attraction, but as architects returning to inspect a masterpiece they designed. The rooms were a living timeline. Day, one fan shoulder to shoulder with kids who discovered Paid in Full through their parents. You could feel it before the first baseline gratitude, curiosity, and the hush that falls when history is about to speak. Rakim kept it simple about what those nights meant. The effect they've had on people's lives still fuels the artistic fire. That line compresses the entire art. He walked away when the industry tried to flatten him into a template. He returned when he could stand as a standard. Templates chase moments. Standards create eras. Side by side again, Eric B's command of the boards and Rakim's surgical breath control reminded audiences why the blueprint still holds. Layered internal rhyme, poised delivery, beats that leave space for meaning. No cosplay, no forced nostalgia, just the original chemistry refined, not remixed. The comeback also validated his restraint. Rakim has always edited his legacy with intention, refusing to flood timelines or dilute the brand with disposable output. Those shows proved that patience can be a strategy, not a stall. The catalog Paid in Full. Follow the leader. Don't Sweat the Technique didn't need reinvention to feel new. It needed context, care, and the reminder that timelessness isn't loud. it's lasting. And that brings us back to the myth that shadows this story, the missing album. The reunion didn't erase it, it reframed it. By choosing purpose over pressure, then, Rakim preserved the very core that made those 2017 rooms electric now. The crowd didn't come to mourn what never dropped. They came to celebrate what never broke. Let's deal with the elephant in the room. Did walking away from Oh My God cost hip-hop a classic? Maybe. The math looks irresistible, Dre's immaculate beats, Rakim's pen, and the raw energy of 2000-2003. In one universe, that record bulldozes radio, rescues chart momentum, and cements a late career coronation. Features multiply, tours expand, and the story writes itself. But in our universe, the album never existed, and Rakim's legend didn't crack under the pressure to perform a posture he no longer lived. The absence became part of the myth. It turned into a living question. Would Dre have unlocked a new lane for Rakim, or would the machine have welded him into a permanent scowl? That uncertainty, frustrating and magnetic, kept his name in the realm of what if, instead of fell off. Here's the quiet truth. Not every dream collaboration should happen. Perfect on paper doesn't always equal purpose in practice. Sometimes the most radical move an artist can make is subtraction, choosing not to make the thing everyone demands because it would betray the thing that made them great. That's the price and the payoff of saying no. So what did Rakim actually reject? Not the man, not the talent, not the legacy. He rejected a formula, uniform aggression as identity, confrontation as default, a narrow lane dressed up as destiny. He killed that idea quietly, firmly, with respect, and the result is a legacy that reads clean. The God MC preserved authorship, even if it meant leaving potential classics on the table, which raises the real next. When an artist protects the core, what does the world hand back over time? New rooms, new stages, new ears? And just when you think the story ends there, one more turn waits off camera. Sometimes that turn looks like a reunion, sometimes like a book, and sometimes like a stage packed with 3 generations all listening closely again. Rakim kept the record straight, no bridges burnt. He credited Dr. Dre's genius and mainstream instincts, and he never framed their story as a feud. His stance stayed simple. The artist that I am is the artist I want to remain. That line explains the split better than any headline. Even after the mutual parting in 2003, he left the door cracked, saying he hoped they could connect for a little joint one day. The issue wasn't respect, it was authorship. There was heat. You hear it on Jay-Z's The Watcher P2, where Rakim moves over a Dre framework with surgical control, and on the 8 Mile soundtrack, leaks like After You Die confirm sessions happened and ideas spark. On It's Nothing from the archive, Live Lost Found, he distilled the chapter into one verdict. He went to LA to bridge night and day. I guess it wasn't meant to happen. What never aligned was philosophy. In the booth, a prompt was to talk that shit, to lean into confrontation the market could weaponize. Rakim's countervision was a clean, universal record you could play for your daughter and my grandmother, the hard knock TV polarity of kill versus bring somebody to life. He contrasted Dre's directive style with Eric B's hands-off, go ahead, a reminder that his language isn't negotiable. The fragments prove possibility. The missing album proves conviction. That's why this story is evergreen. Every era attempts artists to trade voice for velocity, fit the template, let the market decide meaning. Rakim chose the harder path, protect the core, and let the catalog speak. Years later on The Breakfast Club, he said moments like The Watcher Part 2, lit a fire, not a feud. 2 masters, 2 operating systems, both historic, not compatible on that project. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a missing classic and a preserved legend. It leaves us with a bus ticket that meant more than a plane ride ever could. It leaves us with a line that answers everything and nothing at the same time. Why I got a beef with everybody? Because in a system where conflict fuels the feed, refusing to perform a war can feel like sabotage. But for Rakim, it wasn't sabotage. It was self-respect. He didn't disappear. He didn't fade. He didn't get out-rapped by time. He chose silence over noise, substance over trend, purpose over posture, and in doing so, he kept the one thing even the greatest artists lose when they chase everything, a spotless core. Now it's your turn. Was walking away from Oh My God a mistake that cost us a classic? Or did Rakim make one of the most important artistic decisions in hip-hop by refusing to bend? If this is just the tip of the iceberg, if these are the only pieces of the story we're allowed to see, what else is hidden in vaults, hard drives, and memories we'll never hear? Drop your thoughts below. Because if this is what we know now, imagine what he hasn't told us yet.